don't know. Do you want me here? Where would you like me?
That's fine.
Good? Okay. Good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me? Because it's weird up here. Yes? Anybody know? No. No? Okay. Louder?
Put on that courtroom voice, Ari.
That's what I'm trying to figure out here. Okay, you're good. Okay. So my name is Ari Goldkind, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Toronto, and as many of you know, I'm also running for mayor. So, I am here tonight with two hats on. I've got my criminal lawyer hat on, which is my day job and my full life for the last 10 years, but I'm also running for mayor, and one of my big interests is in policing issues, and more specifically, the police budget. Tonight is about carding. So, what I'm going to talk about, and my view is, I want to answer questions. My whole thing is, whatever you want to ask me, I'll answer. Some of the answers may be popular, some may not, but this issue is a minefield of carding. So let me start, before I go into a few remarks. How many of you in the room are conceptually against the practice of carding? Show of hands. And I'm going to guess when I say how many of you support the practice of carding, I may be lucky to see one hand. Anybody who's willing to put their hand up? Okay, one hand. That's very brave. I actually admire the braveness of that. So, the issue of carding is a very complex one, but given what I do for a living, it is actually an extremely simple one. Carding, and many of you will understand carding in a much more first-hand way than I will. I defend it. I deal with it in court after the damage is done. Carding comes down to a simple issue as I see it. Trust. And the question is, does the practice of carding, and I'm assuming everybody knows what carding is, yes? Does anybody not know what it is? Okay, is it worth me just, you want me to clarify it for a second? I shouldn't assume, because I got the same email you got saying, what, okay.
Quick legal brief.
Okay, and I don't even do anything technical. So long story short, what carding is not the example that you very eloquently gave about the cops busting through the door and putting everybody on the ground. That is a very different fish that I won't get into unless somebody asks about. Carding is, to use the easiest example, 2 or 3 or 4 young black men are walking down the street. That's all they're doing. Or they're playing basketball. They're on a basketball court. And I mean that literally. This is not some weird example. And what they're doing is absolutely not connected to any crime. You must understand this. They're not suspected of committing any crime, and they're not part of any police investigation. Now, the reason I say that, to answer your question, is if that wasn't the case, the police have a very different right to go up to those young men. But there is no right in law to go up to any citizen on the street and essentially bug them. The Toronto Police, and this is now where the minefield is, and I'm going to put it out in the room because if you don't talk about it honestly, the issue can't be debated, which is, and I'm sure many of you know this because Jim Rankin in the Star, does everybody know the Star series on this? Show of hands, anybody? Okay, so you may all know, because don't shoot the messenger, that 30% of violent crimes, any of you can finish this sentence so that I don't take the heat, this is important. 30% of violent crimes are committed, according to the statistics, which are accepted to be true, by men. That's true, so I'm guilty of that. But by black men. So the police's view is that even though the black percentage, population-wise, in Toronto is 8%, the police, and you have to be fair to their example, not that I totally buy it, is that they have to focus on where the crime is. So to finish the answer of what carding is, they go up to these young 3 men. They keep a database. They fill out a card, who these men are hanging with, who they're talking to, what they're doing, what they're wearing, their skin color. It goes into a database. And they're called associates. So if there's a crime committed, the police have access to this sort of minority report database that lets them know all about certain segments of the population. Now, do they do this in Forest Hill and Rosedale? Absolutely not. I'm going to answer everything. Now, no, I will answer everything. If you know anything about me, I duck nothing. But the point of carding is that they say that they're trying to build intelligence. However, and this is the interesting part of it, there is no study that's ever been done, and these things are studied, to show that it actually does anything to solve crimes. There may be one-off examples here and there, but what it does is it erodes the trust of an entire community in the city. And the question becomes, is the price that's paid for this lack of trust, this breakdown of trust where you have police officers intimidating? Now that's the right word, because as this conversation goes, and I'm sure I'm close to 5 minutes, my view of carding is sort of nuanced, because I see both ends. The investigation of crime, but ruining the reputation of a police service that in my view doesn't always serve and protect. That statement has to mean something. And the fundamental problem of carding, and you actually touched on this, so you've said something out loud that I think puts an end to the fallacy of this practice, which is the police will tell you. And when I say you, I don't mean me, I don't mean you, I don't mean you. But there are people in this room that get stopped all the time. And the police will tell you that those people have a choice to not talk to the cops. That they can say to the cops, I don't want to talk to you, I want nothing to do with you. Which in law, which many of you may know, there's no obligation to answer the questions. But as you've seen from a whole series of YouTube videos, which are very interesting, it never works out in practice the way it is in theory. So these young men, and they're almost always young men of color, let's not pretend otherwise, are not given any choice to walk away. And that is where the rubber meets the road on this for me, because of the lack of choice to answer these questions. You can't say to the cop, go
away.
I was going to put it in a more Ari-like way, because there's going to be a price to pay. But two, and this is a big thing to me, and now I'm switching to my political hat, without lapel cameras on, which is the most important thing that could happen in Toronto policing ever. You always have the word of a most often, or more often than not, white police officer against the word of a young black man who said, look, I didn't have a chance to go, and meanwhile the situation gets out of hand, some violence may ensue, and the trust is eroded. So this is an issue that is a minefield, and I'm hoping that with this introduction of what you understand and what you hear the stakes are, given the real numbers, the job that you fairly said police have to do, what's the balance? And I look forward to answering any questions that you all have, and I'll stop there.